All right, hello everybody, and welcome to this session where we are going to cover one sample CodeVita problem, and I'm going to guide you through that problem one by one, and I'll show you how I would solve that problem if it had come in CodeVita. So the question for our subject today is called bank compare, and just before I start, just let me tell you that we're going to cover a couple of things here. Number one, we'll see how to actually approach the problem. We'll see how you can break down the problem into small chunks and how you can actually solve it in those chunks. So that's the first thing we're going to see. You're also going to see how I code it on my own system. So even though CodeVita is an online compiler and you can actually code it online and you're supposed to submit a code online, in fact on our Edyst platform also you can submit the code online and see how it's going. I want you to get used to how you would code the solution on your own system, and I will share how I am coding the solution on my system, how I'm using some shortcuts, some techniques to help me in actually code that solution. All right, so without much delay, let's get started. And just before we get started again, please share this with your friends via WhatsApp, via email, however you want to, because it will be very useful. At the end of this session, I will be doing a Q&A session, a question answer session. So if you have any specific questions or your friends have any specific questions or doubts, I am more than happy to help them. For that, they need to be online over here. So please make sure that they are live and you've shared it with your friends. All right. So we'll get started, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to see what is the meaning of this question as it is. So this is the first thing we're going to do. Okay, just give me 1 minute. Yeah. All right. So this is the question, that's bank compare. It was asked in CodeVita 2018, so just last year. So what does the question actually say? Okay, so what exactly does this question say? Well, we can open up the actual question, and I want to open up that question first so that we read the question actually before we even go around coding it. So we have the question on the Edyst platform with us. Let me open up that question, and yeah, here we go. So let me just show you how to open it up. So this is bank compare. I open it up here, and so the question is quite long. I'm going to just go over it a little bit, and then I'll show you the illustration or the small example of that question. So there are two banks, bank A and B, and they are offering a certain interest rate, and that interest rate varies. So we have received offers from both bank in terms of annual rate of interest, tenure, and variations of rate of interest over the entire tenure. Basically, we've been given some rates of interest of the bank A and bank B over the years, and we have to choose which one of them cost you the least interest. Okay, and we have to reject the other. So if you look at the output, we have to output either bank A or bank B. Okay, so I'll come to the middle part, the explanation of it. But if you look at it, we have to output either bank B or bank A given the terms as per the question. Now, what are the terms? We'll come to that in a bit. But that's the first thing that's required. The question asks us to either choose bank A or either choose bank B. That's the first thing. Now, the loan repayment happens at a monthly frequency, and equated monthly installment or EMI is calculated. And they've given us a formula for the calculation. So what we're supposed to do is we are supposed to calculate the EMI, and we are supposed to tell which one has the lesser EMI, and the one with the lesser EMI is the one that we're going to choose. All right, so I hope that makes sense for all of you. And then it's given a bunch of input formats. So we'll just lay low on the input format for a bit, and let's just again understand the question better on how we actually can solve it. So just going back to the question, and this is just my notes on the question. What you're given is you're given a bank A and a bank B. Okay, so you're given a bank A and you're given a bank B, and for both bank A and bank B, we are given the principal amount, that is the total, the initial amount that we have borrowed. We are given the years, that is the total number of years that we have borrowed it for, and we are given the slabs plus monthly rate across the years, and we'll explore what this is. So essentially, we are given a bunch of input. The input is the amount that we have borrowed, the amount of years that we have borrowed it for, the slab of each EMI, and we'll come to the slab in a bit, plus the monthly rate across the years. And we have to calculate for bank A, we have to calculate for bank B, and we have to see which has the one that is giving the lesser interest and not the greater one. We have to see which is the one that's giving the lesser interest, and the one that is giving the lesser interest is the one that we want to push, or that is the one that we want to choose. Okay, so let's just go back to the question and see what is the input format that we've been given. Okay, so if we go back to the question, this is what the input format looks like. The first line is the number of test cases, which is very standard in CodeVita questions. We'll come back to this one a little bit later. So what in the number of test cases, we are given the first line as the principal amount. Let's look at the example. In this case, 10,000 would be the principal amount. That is the amount that we are borrowing. All right, I hope you can all see it's 10,000. The next line that is given is total tenure in years. That is, we have borrowed it for 20 years. Okay, so we've completely borrowed it for 20 years. And finally, after that, we are given the slabs. Now, what is the meaning of slabs? We'll have a look at the example and then we'll understand. It's saying we are given 3 slabs. The first slab is we can pay it over 5 years at a rate of 9.5%. The second slab is 10 years, which can be paid over 9.6%. The third slab is 5 years, which again can be paid at a monthly interest rate of 8.5%. Okay, so that's what it means, that we have, this is the total amount that we borrowed. Bank A is offering us this rate, bank B is offering us this rate. Okay, so I'm just going to repeat that. What we have is, this is what it looks like. This is the entire input, and just breaking it down, we have the first part, that is the principal amount is given as the first line. 20 is the number of years, and slabs is the number of slabs that were given. So totally over here, we are given about 3 slabs. Each of the 3 slabs, we are given number of years. So in this case, it would be number of years 5, and the rate for 5 years, that is 9.5%. Then we are given 10 as the number of years and 9.6%. Then 5 and then 8.5%. And this entire thing is for bank A. The remaining part is for bank B. It's the same stuff, but it's for bank B. So for bank B, we have again 3 slabs. 10 years, we get 6.9%. Then the next 5 years, we get 8.5%. And the next 5 years, we get 7.9%. So you can see very nicely that 10 plus 5 plus 5 is leading us to 20 years, which is the total number of years we've borrowed it for. Similarly, 5 plus 10 plus 5 is giving us 20 years, which is the total number of years that we've borrowed it for. Okay, so I hope everyone's understood the question so far, because the first thing that we ought to do is we should understand the question and the input format. Without understanding these two, don't move forward. A very good practice is take a piece of paper and take a pen and make sure that you actually write down what I've said, and make sure that you, by yourself, you see these arrows that I've made over here, you yourself should make those arrows and understand and break down the input yourself. Once you do that, breaking down the problem becomes easier. Remember, as I always say, CodeVita is all about breaking the problem down into different parts. Okay. So far what we've seen is, let's recap the question. The question says there's a bank A, there's a bank B. Bank A is offering us certain interest amount. Bank B is offering us a certain interest amount. We have to see which one is offering us lesser interest amount. The one that is offering us a lesser interest amount is the one that we're going to choose. The way they're offering the interest is not straightforward. They are giving us different slabs. So if let's say we borrowed it for 20 years, bank A over here is giving us in slabs of 5 years, 10 years and 5 years. And in each of those slabs, they are giving us a different interest rate. Bank B is offering us a slab of 10 years, 5 years and 5 years. And in those slabs, they're giving us a different interest rate. Okay. Now, how do we actually calculate EMI? That is the main meat of the problem. Once you've actually understood how the syllabus is, the input is taken, then we actually we see how we actually can calculate the EMI. So just going back, let's see how the question defines it. So I'm just going back to the question again. And so this is how the question is defining it. This is the formula for, second, let me just zoom in. Yeah. So this is the formula for the interest rate. As you can see, it's a little bit difficult to understand. So it's always better if you write it in your own words. This is what I did. I wrote it in my own words and I'll just switch it to that. So let me just show you the formula. And the formula is this, that so the EMI is the principal into the monthly interest divided by 1 minus 1 plus monthly interest raised to 12 into the number of years. So I just missed that over here, but if I could just add it, it would be, 1 second, n. Yeah, so it's 12n, where n is the number of years. So let's just cross verify that with the question, and that is what we get. Yeah, it is loan amount into the monthly interest rate, that is what we have, divided by 1 minus 1 plus, 1 minus 1 divided by 1 plus monthly interest rate into 12 into number of years. So that is what we get over here. That is the formula if we substitute all the values. So this is really the difficult part, that is how do we actually calculate this. But if we have all our values correctly, then for each slab, we will be able to calculate the EMI, add up the EMI for each slab, and then once you've added up the EMI for each slab, we know what is the EMI for bank A. Similarly, do that for bank B, compare both of them, and we'll get the answer. Okay? So again, let's break this problem down into different pieces. And let's look at a simple pseudocode that we can do. So the first things first in the pseudocode is, let's just take the input. So when we take the input, and that is what is being given in the question, that the first thing we'll get is input of test cases. So for each test case, the first two things that we input is the principal amount and the number of years. So just going back to the question, and let me just go back to the question. It says, yeah. So just going back to the question, it says the first line K will consider the number of test cases. That's what we have done. The next line P will contain the loan amount. Then after that we have tenure, that is in years, the total number of years. After that we will get for bank A N1, that is the number of slabs, and then we will list down in the next N1 lines the interest rate and their period. Similarly, in the next N2 lines we will get the interest rate and the period. What does that mean? In the first line we get the value of K, that is the number of lines, the number of test cases. After we get the number of test cases for each test case, so this is, it says K is 2. When K you get as 2, the first test case is this, the second test case is over here. So the first test case says 10,000 is the principal amount, 20 is the total number of years. Then what we get is the number of slabs. So 3 is the number of slabs. So far, just by going back to our pseudocode, we have taken the test cases, and for each test case, we've opened a for loop that in each test case, we are going to take the principal amount and the number of years we have to repay it. Now, what we need to do is take input the number of slabs possible for us. So we take input number of slabs. Before we take input number of slabs, we have to do this for each bank. So again, the number of slabs and the interest rate for each will vary for bank to bank. We have 2 banks, so for each bank we have to take the number of slabs. So for each bank we'll first take the number of slabs. Once you've taken the number of slabs, for each slab we should calculate the interest for that slab. How do we calculate the interest for that slab? By taking the input of the interest rate and by taking the input of the number of years. And once we code this, you'll understand that. Then you calculate the interest for that slab and you add it into your bank's sum. So again, just recapping, we had number of slabs first. That is, we took, let's say there were 3 slabs. For each slab, what is going to happen? We're going to take the monthly interest rate and the number of years for that slab, and we're going to calculate the interest for that slab. And once we've calculated the interest for that slab, we are going to add it back into the sum for that bank. So we add it back into the sum for the bank. What will happen is at the end of this loop, we will have calculated the sum for our bank I. Then once you calculated for the next bank, what we are going to get is the bank sum. So if bank sum 0, that is if bank sum of bank A is less than bank sum of bank B, then we just print bank A. Otherwise, we print bank B. Okay. So if you look at it, the pseudocode has a lot of information and you may not have followed everything completely. That's completely fine. Don't panic. Okay. I've already seen this problem and I've broken it down myself. If you just take a piece of paper and pen, you yourself will be able to break it down into this pseudocode. But what I want you to recall or take away from here is that make sure that you write it in pseudocode before you even start coding. Because if you don't write it in pseudocode and you start coding directly, then it becomes very difficult. You'll have to think while you're coding. Now, what all I need to do is make sure that I just implement the pseudocode, right? And yes, there might be one or two mistakes, but while we are coding, we can fix that. But without thinking on the pseudocode, if you go directly into the code, then definitely you will have problems. This way, if you think of the pseudocode, you will reduce the time it takes to actually write it into code. Okay, so let me just start coding. And before I go into coding, let me tell you that when you code, let me just show you that the Edyst platform has the place where you can actually write your code. So we have over here and you can actually write your code over here. But I will highly suggest that instead of using the Edyst platform editor, please use your own local editor. The reason is even on CodeVita, they expect you to write the local code first, that is write the code on your platform first, on your computer first, and then translate that onto their platform. That is upload it onto their platform. So the more quicker that you get into that habit, the better. And the software that I use, the IDE that I use, so I am using Java, and for Java I prefer IntelliJ IDE platform. Now again, that is just my personal preference. You can use whichever one you want. If you're a C student, if you're a C++ student, you can use something else. For Python, you can probably use PyCharm. It's up to you. But make sure you are well versed with a coding platform before you even start coding. Because if you don't accustom yourself to one of these coding platforms, you will be always confused on how to code when it actually comes to CodeVita. And just look at the way I will be coding right now. You will see the advantages of using a platform like IntelliJ IDE. Okay. So yes, so without much delay, let me just go into that. And we'll keep coming back to the pseudocode one by one. The first thing that we need to take care of is we have to input the test case, and for each test case we should input the principal and the input years. So let's get started with that. So I'm just going to shift to my IntelliJ IDE. Okay, so here we are. So notice the first things first, it already has done a few things. It already has created a main class, it's already created a main method, and I just need to write my code over here. The second good thing over here is that it's completely auto save. That is, I don't need to press Control S or save every time. It will just save everything. As that's the setting that you can make it auto save. Okay, so what is the first thing we were supposed to do? We were supposed to take the number of test cases. So for that, I need to define something called a scanner. And just before I even start, you can see brilliantly that it's starting to give me autocomplete options. The best part about autocomplete is that it really reduces your time spent in coding. So you're thinking more of the logic. So if you see, I'm very quickly able to write the code because of the autocomplete. The other thing is, while you're writing, it will start showing you red lines if you are doing some wrong syntax errors. Okay, so we'll keep learning more about that. But in Java, this is how you take an input. You define a scanner, and for that scanner, let's say I have number of test cases. So let me write int. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, int test cases is equal to scan dot next int. Okay. So these are the number of test cases. So what I'll do is while test cases minus minus greater than 0. This is nothing but saying that I have to run this loop test case number of times. So I'll just write a comment. It's always good to write comments because you'll come back to your code again. During CodeVita, you need not write the comments because it might just be a little time constraint, but generally you should write the comments. So just give me 1 second. And yeah, I'm just adding myself so you can see me while I code. And yep. All right. So yeah, now we're good to go. So as you can see over here, this is what I've done. I've just taken the test cases. There you go, number of test cases. Now, what are we supposed to do for each test case? We were supposed to take a principal amount, that is, let's say loan amount is equal to that input. And what is the next case? What was the next thing that we were supposed to do? We were supposed to take the okay, so once we've taken we were supposed to take the number of years, so that is the tenor, that is the number of years is nothing but scan dot next int. Okay, so now that we have this, before we go ahead into the next step, let us do something. Let us define an array called bank sum. This is nothing but the sum of all the interest that we are going to incur, and this bank sum is an array. So, and it's a decimal array. In Java, the default for decimal is double. In Python, you really don't even need to take much. In C++, you could use float, up to you. Make sure you know the default decimal value for your coding language. So double bank sum is equal to new double 2, right? So this is basically, we created a new array to hold bank sum, to hold banks sum. 1 second. Yep. So that's what we've done here. Okay. So once we've done that, after that, what we're going to do is we're going to initialize both of them to 0, because initially the interest rate for both is 0. So there I go. Okay. So now that we've initialized both to 0, let's just go back to our pseudocode. And what does the pseudocode say? So let's give me a minute while I switch back to my pseudocode. So what the pseudocode is saying is that for each bank, the first thing we should do is take the number of slabs. So let's go ahead and do that. So for each slab, we're going to take the number of banks. So that is, for each bank, we're taking the number of slabs. So for each bank, right? Now look at it. It's even going to help me complete my for loop. So for each bank, that is for int I is equal to 0, I less than 2, because we only have 2 banks, right? For each bank, what we're going to do is take the number of slabs. So int number of slabs is the input. Next int. Okay. And once you have taken the number of slabs as input, again we need to run a loop, because for each slab we will need to take the rate, that is the monthly interest rate, as well as the years. So again we write a for loop, and this time, yeah, let's take the variable as j less than number of slabs. Now for each slab, what we're going to do is take the number of years is equal to scan dot next int, and we're going to take int the interest rate, and the interest rate itself is equal to monthly double monthly rate is equal to scan dot next double. So here I've taken the interest rate in terms of double. So these are the two things that we have to input. Let's just go back to the question and make sure that we are on the right track in terms of the input format. So going back to the question, I see that what we have to do is, the first thing, we did take the number of test cases. This is the principal amount. Then after that, we took the number of years. And once you've taken the number of years, these are the number of slabs. For each slab, first we took the slab years, and then we took the monthly interest rate. Okay, so far so good. Now for this slab, we should be calculating our EMI. So that's the tricky part, and that was the formula over here. Okay, that is this formula. What I'm going to do is I'm going to calculate the numerator separately and denominator separately, and then I'll divide them. Excuse me. So now that we have this, we have to implement the formula. So for the formula, let me just go back. I'll implement the numerator separately and the denominator separately. And so just give me 1 minute for that. So what I'm going to do is, yeah. So 1 second. Yeah. So let's first calculate the denominator. Okay, it was nothing but 1 minus 1 divided by, and it was the power of 1 plus, so it was 1 plus monthly interest rate or something, and we can just write it right now without thinking too much. So that's monthly interest rate, this entire thing raised to 12. So this is what it would be. Again, this is not correct syntax, but this is what the denominator was looking like. So what we're going to do is 12 into n is what it said, right? If you remember. Now again, this is wrong syntax. We'll one by one get it to the correct syntax. So what was it raised to? Well, it was raised to nothing but the number of years. So that is what we have over here. But again, this is not the correct syntax for raising to the power. The correct syntax would be to use math.pow. So that is a function in Java. Every language has that function. Make sure you know the function for your language. But this is what it will look like. So we have math.pow. This is 1 plus monthly rate raised to 12 into number of years. Now this would be divided by, let's just put the bracket properly. So yeah, 1 minus this is what happens. We put the bracket properly, and this is what we get. So we have this as the denominator. Okay. The next thing, the numerator is pretty easy to calculate. The numerator was nothing but 1 second. So what was the numerator? So the numerator was nothing but the principal into the monthly rate. So double numerator is equal to, so the principal amount is the loan amount into the monthly interest rate. So that's what we got as a numerator. And so the sum, that is the sum for this one, should be double current underscore sum is nothing but numerator divided by denominator, and then we have to add, that is bank underscore sum of I is equal to bank underscore sum of I plus the current sum. What does this mean is we are adding EMI to our current bank. So let's say if it's bank A, it will add to bank A. So now this was the difficult part. I'm sure some of you might not have got it fully. So please, if at all you are at that stage, just pause, look at the code and see what's actually happening. So just pause and look at the code and you'll understand what's actually happening. Over here, I'm just going to wait over here so that you can look at the code and understand what's happening here. We calculated the denominator separately, we calculated the numerator separately, and we did numerator by denominator. Now, the interesting thing to note here is, because this is all in doubles, one of the problems that all of you will face is the output for Java may be different, for the output for Python may be different, the output for C++ may be different, depending on the precision. That is, each language calculates fractions and decimals in a very different way. But the good part is we just need to say which interest rate is greater and which one is lesser. We are not calculating to the precise decimal. So we can ignore some of the precision mistakes that come in, that's fine. Okay. So now we calculated the bank sum of I over here. And at the end of it, both of the bank sums will be calculated. After we've calculated the bank sums for each, this is what we will do. We will check if bank sum of 0 is less than bank underscore sum of 1. If yes, then we should just print, what should we print? We should print bank A. Otherwise, we should just print bank B. Okay, so if the first one is lesser, we print bank A. If the second one is lesser, we print bank B. So now I've just written the code. I'm sure there might be some errors. The first time you run the code, it's completely fine if there are errors. Okay, so let's just see. Let's just run the code and see what we are actually going to get. Okay, and before we run the code, we need to have a sample test case in mind. So a good practice is before you even start the code, make sure that they have some test case in mind beforehand. You can just comment it, and you can just keep it there. So let me take the test case that's already there on the platform. So I'm just going to take that test case which is over here. Let me take this test case, which is I'll just take one test case for now. Let's see if that works. Okay. So let me take that one test case and add it back to my IntelliJ as a comment. So this is the test case. The number of test cases is 1, and this is the test case which I have copied. Okay, it might be a little light on the font, but just notice that I've just copied it over there. And let me copy this test case and I'll paste it back into one second. Yeah, I'll paste it back into the input. Okay, so let's just run the code and see how it goes. Okay, yeah. So the first time you run the code, it might just take some time to run because it's a very heavy IDE, but after that it can actually run faster. Okay, so in the first one, it's saying bank B. Is that correct answer for the first one? Let's just go back and check. So for the first one, yes, that is the correct answer. That's the expected output. Let me just show you that. So the expected output for the first one is bank B. Okay, it ran and it gave us the correct output. That's very rare. Don't think that the first time you code, you will actually get the correct answer. That's very rare. I prepared for this, hence I got it. But it's completely fine if you don't get it in your first case. It's completely fine. It's the entire process is you should look at your errors and keep trying to improve yourself. Let's try it for the second test case before we go ahead. Second test case should give bank A. So I've just copied this test case and let me paste it back into where I was at IntelliJ. So now I've pasted it. Let me just paste it back. So again, I'm here. Test case, and yeah, I get bank A. Perfect. So my output seems to be correct. Let me take this code and then put it on the Edyst platform and see if it's passing all of the test cases, because those were the sample test cases. Now, a very important piece of information, and this is really, really important for you before you even copy this code, is IntelliJ or any other platform by default will give you a certain package. So if you can see over here, it's called package com.company. Do not do that on CodeVita. CodeVita will not run packages. So it's a little detailed. You don't need to understand why, but you don't need to copy the package. You can copy everything else, but don't copy the package because it won't run the code. That's it. So it's not that you'll get into trouble. It's just that it just won't run the code because it's not expecting a package. Okay. So now what we're going to do is just copy this entire code without the package. 1 second. So just going. So I did Control C. Let me paste it on the Edyst platform and see how it goes. So I'm just going there and yeah, paste it on the Edyst platform. I clicked run. Right. Yeah, the test cases did pass. That's great. And let me submit the code and see. Have you made any mistake? Okay, yeah, and all right, great. So we passed all the test cases. Again, guys, don't look at this and think that this is how all of the codes work. They don't. I prepared for this. That's why you were able to get it. But it's not always the case. You will take 2 or 3 tries. The main thing is you always go back to your pseudocode. So whenever you are stuck, let's say if I did get some output problem, go back to your pseudocode, then start substituting all the values in each of the codes. And in each of the code, when you substitute the values, for example, over here, I could have substituted the number of slabs value, the calculate interest for slab value, the principal amount. We could have input all of those things and check where we are going wrong. Okay, so make sure you are ready to do that. You will not get everything in your first attempt, but you should know how to debug it. Okay, so I've taken a little long. This is it. This is the end of this coding question, but I have a few important announcements to make before you go ahead. So don't just cancel off right now. Also, if you have any questions regarding this, please feel free to post right now in the comments, which I will just ask my team for if we have any comments. And also, you can also post on the Edyst.com forum. So if you can just go, if I'll show you where to post it, but you can go to the Edyst.com forum, and I am active over there, and I can respond to your code specifically. So let's say your code isn't working correctly, I can go there, respond to your specific code, and then give you the answer as well. Okay. So some more important announcements for you is these are all of the topics that you need to be prepared with in terms of going to CodeVita. Now, as per our analysis of all of the CodeVita questions that we have gone through, the first 5 topics, that is maths, calculations, arrays, strings, searching, and sorting. So these first five are the ones that are the most asked. That is, if you are able to complete any of the questions from these first 5, then there's a good chance you can clear 2 questions or 1 questions, which will actually get you a chance at a direct interview opportunity. So with regards to that, we are going to do 2 more questions as a live webinar, as a YouTube webinar. 2 more questions. The first question is going to come up day after tomorrow, that's Tuesday, 5:30 p.m. and it's called minimum product array, and it is an arrays question. So please mark your date, day after tomorrow, 20th June, 5:30 p.m. Minimum product array. It's an arrays question, so we'll go a little bit into how arrays are done. On 22nd June, 5:30 p.m. we're going to do the Chakraview problem. This is a 2D array. It's a very interesting problem, so do come around for that. And so please mark your date. Please make sure that you subscribe right now and you like the video right now, so that you will have a good chance of actually remembering that these things are going to come up. And also make sure that you register on the Edyst platform, and you'll get updates on this webinar as well. So Thursday 5:30 p.m. and Saturday 5:30 p.m. Mark your dates. The other thing that we're going to do, and this is the bigger announcement, is exclusively on the Edyst platform, we are going to launch about 6 more questions. These questions are related to maths, arrays, and strings. In maths, we're going to cover number game, which is a very difficult question. There's a question called Catch 22, and you won't believe it, exactly like Catch 22, there were about 5 questions asked in the same CodeVita. So if you got the logic for Catch 22, then you will get the logic for all of the other questions also. So we are going to show you how Catch 22 is done. So number game and Catch 22 are maths questions. Calculations questions, we just did one now. Arrays questions, we're going to cover sequence, that is longest progressive sequence, and matrix rotations. And in strings, we're going to cover cyclic palindrome and alphanumeric string. And this will be available only on the Edyst.com platform, and these are launching day after tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. So all of you students who have already enrolled on the Edyst.com platform, make sure that you're ready. And then by day after tomorrow, we are launching the tutorials for these questions along with some other tutorials as well. So those are the announcements from my side. What I'm going to do is right now I'm just going to take a 2-minute pause and going to listen to some questions that some of my team might have come. It might be questions related to this question. It might be questions related to CodeVita, anything. That's completely fine. So shoot away. Let me know if you have any questions. All right. Yeah.
What are the most asked topics and questions in CodeVita?
Okay, so somebody is asking what are the most asked questions and topics in CodeVita. So I'm glad you asked that. So one of the most asked questions and topics are these. Literally, we've gone past all of the 7 seasons of CodeVita, and this is the 8th season. We've gone through all the 7 seasons. And if I were a student, if I was you, and I want to just prepare, like I think there are about 2 weeks left. So for some students, there are only 1 week left. If in the last 2 weeks you just want to prepare, that's like, and make sure that you're able to crack CodeVita, I would suggest that you practice on these first 5. Don't even get into backtracking, recursion, and graphs, because that will take you a lot of time. If you are really on a tight budget, that is on a tight timeline, prepare these 5 topics. Maths, we had covered a sample question in the last webinar. Calculation, I covered a sample question today. Arrays, I'm going to cover in the next 2 webinars. And strings, I'm also launching it on the Edyst.com platform. Make sure you get as much practice on these 5 questions or 5 topics, because if you get practice on these 5 topics, then there's a really good chance you can crack CodeVita at least 2 questions, which means that you could get a direct interview opportunity with TCS. Next question, please. Yeah.
What languages do I need to know? And you showed the example in Java only. Why?
Okay. So I always get this question from students. The question is, which is the language that I need to know, and why did I just use Java? Well, to be honest with you, I use Java because I'm just familiar with Java. I am okay with Python as well. I'm okay with C++. Honestly, it doesn't matter which language you use, as long as you're comfortable in it and you have comfort with some IDE. That is, you've used some IDE platform, like I used IntelliJ. So maybe you can use Visual Studio Code, maybe you can use PyCharm for Python. That's completely up to you. Please use something that you're comfortable with. But if you remember, and again, just going back to the IntelliJ, you can see how easy it was for me with the autocomplete and everything. So I'm just used to Java like that, honestly. But you can use anything. No language is going to give you an advantage or a disadvantage. With Python, you'll get some advantage, but you'll get some disadvantages. With C++, you might get some advantage, some disadvantages. Please do not worry about the language. There are 8 languages supported by TCS. There are C, C++, Java, Python, Ruby, Perl, PHP. Use any one of them. It's completely fine. If you are, as many of you are beginner programmers and you know only C programming, that is also completely fine. We support all of that on the Edyst platform. You can practice it. TCS CodeVita supports it. So don't start learning a new language right now. Focus on the coding logic. Don't focus on the language. Make sure that you're able to take the logic and convert it into code. Okay, so Java doesn't matter. I use Java because I'm comfortable in it, but you can use whichever language that you want. Yes,
So,
any other questions?
how long will it take me to prepare for CodeVita?
Okay, so the other question that we get is how long will it take for you to prepare CodeVita? As I was saying, if you are really on a tight timeline, like let's say it takes you 1 month, but you don't have 1 month because within the next 2-3 weeks, CodeVita is going to finish for everybody. If you are on a tight timeline and you spend about 5 to 6 hours every day, like you need to spend about 6 hours every day, you can cover those 5 topics that I mentioned. And I'm just pulling up those topics again so that you know. So if you any of these all of these 5 topics, if you cover these 5 topics, then there is a good chance you can clear 2 questions. To cover these 5 topics, it will take you a minimum of 2 weeks with 6 hours every day. And I'm assuming you know at least the basics of programming, that you can run some loops, you can do some conditionals, you can maybe use some arrays. Okay, if you do that, then sitting on the Edyst platform and trying to crack all of the codes, there's a good chance within about 2 weeks with about 6 hours of practice every day, you can actually crack CodeVita at least 2 questions.
So, how many questions do we have to solve to get into direct interview after round 1 this year?
Okay, all right. So somebody is asking in this year. Can I have the name of someone who's asking that?
Ramya Bhargavi.
Okay, so Ramya is asking how many questions do I need to crack in the first round to get a direct interview? That's a very good question you ask, and nobody can tell you the real answer for that until the CodeVita question actually comes. For example, if all of the 6 questions are really easy, then the cutoff might be really hard. Conversely, if all of the 6 questions are really difficult, then maybe even 1 question will be sufficient. So really it depends on the level of each candidate. And one thing I can assure you is it will be a little bit more difficult than last time, because each year TCS and all other coding companies are increasing their levels. So the competition is also increasing. So if I were you, I'll just try my best to cover as many questions as possible. And I'll try to crack as many questions as possible and hope for the best then.
So the previous year CodeVita questions are available on online, right? So what will I get if I join Edyst CodeVita?
Okay, so someone's asking a really good question, and that is all of the previous years coding questions are available online. So why do I even need to join the Edyst platform? So this is a really good question. The main reason for that is, so I'll give you 2-3 reasons why you should do that. Number one, on the Edyst platform, we've actually given you certain shortcuts, certain tricks that you can do to solve questions. So for example, this breaking down into topics or breaking down into functions, writing in a very functional way, we have specific tutorials on how you can do that. There are certain things like printing in a certain format or sorting in a certain way. Many students try to implement their own functions, whereas the language can take care of it. All of the languages, doesn't matter which language, all of the languages can take care of it. So it will be beneficial if you go through the tutorials we've put up. The most important thing apart from the tutorials is you can actually run this code on the platform, and for each question we have specifically designed test cases which you would have missed. Many of the students who've already signed up on the tutorial on the Edyst platform regularly ask me which test cases they're missing, which means that if they would have written the code on their own, they would think, hey, I have passed all the test cases, I have got the correct answer. Well, that is not the case. Many times you don't think of all of the test cases, and on our platform, for each question, we have developed at least minimum of 5 test cases, which means that you have to think of all the possible scenarios. So it's a really good practice for you. If you go online, you look at the problem, you don't know if your solution is right or wrong. You can write a solution, but you will never know if it's right or wrong because you don't have enough test cases to do it against. So that's the other thing. The last thing is I am online 24/7. You can ask any student who's already signed up. Every day, at least 2 or 3 times in a day, for each student, I interact with them. I ask which doubts they are facing. I try to answer that for them. And I'm also online on the forums. We have an online forum that you can actually ask each other questions, and I'm online there as well. So if you get stuck online, other platforms you might get the question, but nobody's there to help you out with the solution. We are there to help you out with the solution. So those are some reasons why you should use the Edyst platform. Okay.
Dama Vinay Kumar asks, can you help us solve MockVita questions on Edyst platform?
Okay. So Vinay Kumar, hi Vinay. I actually know him very well. So hey Vinay, thanks for asking the question. Thanks for joining the webinar. Vinay, definitely. So what Vinay is asking is, can we help in solving the MockVita questions? That's a very good question. And yes, we are. The moment we finish the solutions for the previous year's questions, that is by 20th, we are going to start releasing MockVita questions as well. So both for the MockVita 1 and MockVita 2, we are going to release the questions for that, as well as how to solve some of them. And we will be analyzing them and seeing if there is anything new in those questions. So yes, the answer to your question is yes, we are going to solve MockVita 1 and MockVita 2 questions also. So stay tuned for that. That's coming up this week as well. So thanks for reminding us, Vinay.
Rupa Sai asked, if public test cases are passed, how to guess the hidden test cases?
Okay, so Rupa Sai, right? So very good question from Rupa. She's asking if the public test cases are passed, how do you guess the hidden test cases? So I'll share a secret with you right now. The best way to test is, if the hidden test cases are there, right? Many of the students get stuck at that point. The first thing to realize is your code is wrong. Okay, many students start thinking that there's a problem with the platform. You won't believe it, many students actually start writing to TCS. That is, even in the CodeVita exam, they are writing to TCS telling them, hey, my code is correct, your platform is wrong, please fix it. Trust me, the question setter has gone through all the test cases. They know that the problem is correct. The problem is not in the question, the problem is in your code. Okay, that's the first thing to accept. The best way to see which test cases you are failing for is, I'm sure you must have written you must have written your code for the main test case. But generally, the test cases you are failing for are the edge cases. So let me share a few secrets with you. The best way to test is, make sure you're testing for negative numbers. So that's the first thing you should test for. Am I considering negative numbers in this question or not? The second thing to test for is, each question will have something called constraints. Am I making sure that the constraints are followed or not? So just to give you an example, let me go back to the question that we were running. So if I go back to the question over here, the constraints that it says is principal amount is going to be so large. Well, if the principal amount is going to be so large, is it always going to fit in my integer value? This is something I had not considered as well. You should consider this, right? Maybe it might fit into a long value. Maybe it might fit into a long value. Okay, so the next thing to do is look at all of the constraints. Make sure you look at all of the constraints, because that is another place where your hidden test cases might be failing. The third thing to look at is, if you are using arrays, are you ever going into a negative index? Are you considering an array of size 0, that is an empty array, that is there is no element? Are you considering an array of all zeros? Are you considering the case where the array has all negative numbers? So these are all the edge cases that you should look for, and all of these edge cases will come with practice. For integers, it's always good to see if any of the calculation is not making it overflow the integer value. So that's the other thing you should take care of. So these are some of the tips into checking if you are going to pass your test cases or not, that is the hidden test cases or not. And for more tips, stay tuned. We will release a tutorial on the Edyst platform also.
So if I don't qualify or pass the CodeVita, what will the Edyst CodeVita be any helpful for us?
Okay, so one student is asking, this is great. This is a good preparation for CodeVita, but if I don't pass CodeVita, then will this Edyst platform be useful to you? Well, the answer is absolutely yes. It is definitely useful. The reason is, one, we will not close this platform after CodeVita ends. In fact, you have it. You can use it for all of the students who are in their second year and first year. You can actually use this as a reference for your next year's CodeVita. For all of the students who are going into their fourth year, the amount you practice over here for CodeVita's level is a little higher. It's more difficult. Let's say it's here. So the amount of practice you do for CodeVita, if you are really good at CodeVita, then you will be able to clear all of the coding questions that come below that. That is, any campus round that happens on your campus or any off-campus round that you go to, the questions will be easier than CodeVita. So if you prepare for CodeVita, you are prepared for all of the other campus rounds that happen, campus round, off-campus round, any placement rounds. So it's a really good investment. If you prepare for CodeVita, you will be able to prepare for all the other ones as well. So that's my suggestion, and yeah. All right, so I think that ends the question answer round. I don't think anybody else has any more questions. So just before I log off again, let me just bring to your attention what's coming up next. Coming up next, that is day after tomorrow, I'm live again, same time, 5:30 p.m. Minimum product arrays question, and the 2D arrays question will be done on Saturday, which is Chakraview. So make sure you subscribe to the channel right now so that you are always notified whenever we are going to do the next live session. Make sure that you always also share this with your friend. Please also like, so that your friends will also come to know. We will also be getting more outreach with other students. So please make sure that you are available for these webinars. And also for the students who are already on the Edyst platform and students who are going to sign up, 6 new tutorials coming your way: number game, sequence, longest progressive sequence, cyclic palindrome, catch-22, matrix rotation, alphanumeric sorting. 6 new tutorials are going to come your way. So stay tuned for that. That is by day after tomorrow as well. So this is the upcoming schedule. Make sure that you mark your calendars for that. And just like to thank all of you for being on this webinar. It's great to see all of you interested in coding. And until next time, see you. All the best to everybody. And if you have any doubts about implementing this bank compare problem or any other problem, I am available on the Edyst platform. So you can reach out to me over there. Lastly, any specific queries about Edyst, this is our email ID. That is our